Alrighty, howdy folks. My name is Eric, and today we are going to be deploying the Element Server Suite, otherwise known as the Matrix stack, for a chat network on a Kubernetes cluster. This video is going to be a bit different from my usual ones, as is usual at this point, in a few ways. First of all, usually I film these videos post hoc, generally speaking, or I have recently been filming them post hoc, in that I complete the project that I'm working on and then I show it on a live stream, knowing what I want to show and what I have done. This time, I am going to be doing it live. I have not yet completed this configuration. I have not deployed this just yet, and today I am going to be live streaming myself doing that. I need to write this configuration or configure this configuration, whatever the appropriate verb is there, and then deploy it to my Kubernetes cluster. I already have a Matrix stack that is running. It's using a different repository. I will show you that now. It's called Small Hack Matrix Chart. Excuse me. And this has served me well. Sorry, I kicked my chair behind me. This repository, or this Helm chart, has served me well thus far. I have a running instance of Element and Matrix on my network, but there are a few problems with it that I will get into probably shortly. And so as a result, I have decided that I want to switch over to this one, which is the official Matrix stack from Element. The main differences are that this is, well, the official stack, and also that it is using the components that would be necessary for the most up-to-date version of Matrix and Element. That is to say, Element has two different clients that it supports, the standard Element and Element X being the newest version. And Element X uses, we can scroll down here and see, it's a little bit too much detail right here up front. It uses WebRTC instead of Coturn for voice over IP stuff. We'll get there. Anyway, another way in which this video is going to be different from my usual ones is that its home is going to be on Gitea rather than Discourse. Most people are probably going to see this video on YouTube, in which case feel free to like and subscribe. There will be a link in the description to this issue on Gitea, and I can embed the video in a comment here, much in the same way I can embed it in my Discourse posts. And this is just a richer home for this content. It contains the actual source code that I will be working on in this video. So, the video will be, well, I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and I'm also going to upload it to Min.io. Min.io is an object storage thing. We don't need to worry about that right now. Min.io is something that I host on my servers. So I post this video to Min.io and then put a link to it to embed it here in Gitea. Long story short, I would love to invite you to sign in with Google here on Gitea and leave a comment or interact with the video over here instead of on YouTube, because self-hosted stuff is cool. Anyway, let's dig into it. So, as I said, well, before anything, let me go ahead and show you why this is going to be a more interesting place for it. I'm going to start my timer. Look at that. I have started working, and I can track that data here, and you will see that data alongside this video. Isn't that super cool? Anyway, as I've said, I have an existing deployment of Matrix using that Small Hack repository. That is here on the right. And this makes things, on the one hand, a little bit easier for us, but on the other hand, a little bit more difficult for us. It's a little bit easier because I have an example configuration that I know works. There are unfortunately additional parts to this. I have tried making this do a number of things that did not work, so only certain parts of this are relevant. But point being, I have a functional configuration here on the right, and on the left I have the deployment that we are going to be working on today. Now, there's a lot of content here on the left. There's actually over 3,000 lines of configuration things here. Now, we don't need to worry too much about that. First of all, a lot of them are comments, and second of all, most of them are not going to be wildly relevant to our needs. If we look at this repository, which is the upstream source for my Helm chart, the one on the left that I was showing a second ago, we can go into charts, matrix stack, values.yaml, and we can see I have just copied the contents of this file exactly into the left here. So let's back up a step. The way I am deploying this to my Kubernetes cluster is through Ansible, which is an automation package. We describe what we want to do using YAML files, just describes the tasks that we want to run, and Ansible is going to run it. It can be further modularized, I suppose is a word, into what are called roles. And a role is like a module that you will import into a Ansible project. So let's say I have a Ansible project that is to set up my entire network. Well, one role in that might be to set up a Ubuntu machine. I might have 30 Ubuntu machines, and I don't want to rewrite the role every single time. So, this is going to be a role is going to be something that I can import and say, yeah, run this role 5 times to create 5 Ubuntu machines. This is not an Ansible tutorial. I think I've said that in other videos. Point being, this repository that I'm working in here on the left is a Ansible role, and I will show it to you on Git just so that that's clear. The repository here is Ansible role matrix stack, and I just used a basic template for an Ansible role to create all the files and things in here. The file that we are looking at the moment is in tasks, and it's this main.yaml, and all we really need to do is say that the name of the task that we want to run is just deploy the stack. It's going to call the Kubernetes Helm library, and then we just pass it a few basic things to create a namespace so that's it's isolated from other things that I've deployed to my Kubernetes cluster. I'm going to assume that you know about namespaces in Kubernetes at this point. Eventually we get down here to the values, which is just the specific configuration that we want to use for this instance of Matrix. And so that's why I've copied the exact contents of the values.yaml from the repository over here onto the left. It gives me a starting point. What's in the repository is a list of basically all of the configuration options. So I've copied all of them here, and I'm going to go through and delete most of them because I don't need them. But which ones I don't need specifically, we will see. And I'm also going to delete comments. Now, this is the point in the video where things will deviate quite significantly from previous videos in that I need to write code and think. So I will be quiet very often, and this is going to be an experiment, so we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to delete these first few lines, and I'm not really sure what matrix tools is. Used in multiple components. I'm not sure what that is. Before we start doing this, maybe it would help to look at the full stack that we are deploying, because there are multiple components to Matrix. Let's just go to the main thing here. So, first of all, what I am deploying is this ESS community version. And the community version is, according to their documentation, tailored to mid/small or small/mid-scale non-commercial community use cases, designed to easily and quickly set up a Matrix deployment. Okay, interesting. What is different about ESS Pro? That's my real question. So, it is designed to support enterprise requirements in terms of advanced IAM, which is identity and authentication, compliance, which is referring to specific industries, like if you're working in healthcare, you need HIPAA compliance. So ESS Pro is dealing with compliance stuff. That does not apply to me. Scalability, high availability, high density, multi-tenancy. So high density and multi-tenancy, I'm not really sure what that's referring to, and I don't think it really applies to me. But high availability and scalability is what Kubernetes is for. So I don't think I'm not necessarily getting that. Maybe it's it's by default the resources that they have set to use. We'll see that in a second once we get into the values.yaml. Maybe they have intentionally set it down here to consume less resources and this one to consume more, but that seems like something I can configure myself, so not a tremendous difference. Makes use of Synapse Pro to provide infrastructure cost savings and improve user experience under high load. I don't know about that. I would imagine that my current instance of Synapse excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself once again. Let's ignore that. Point being, I've said that a few times now. We can start a count, but I'm not so sure that I am not getting anything from the ESS community that I would be getting with this ESS Pro. If we go into a little more detail here, specifically with the identity management, we can see that it's talking about using single sign-on integration and LDAP down here. And I am interested in those things, but we will see that part of what I am going to be deploying is something called the Matrix Authentication service, which handles OAuth 2 with upstream providers. So I'm not really sure that that's actually a difference that ESS Pro is giving me either. So I'm going to be deploying this community edition, and I am honestly not convinced that the Pro edition comes with much more technically. Probably comes with support from the organization, which is probably the most value added here. Anyway, what I was trying to do was show you the components that we need to deploy here. And this is a pretty good, this is a decent enough. This is better. So Synapse is going to be the Matrix server. Matrix is a chat network, and we need a server and a client. Synapse is going to be the server. And the reason that it's called something different from Matrix is that Matrix is just an open protocol, and anybody can use it to implement a client or a server of their choice. So there are lots of different instances of servers and clients for the Matrix protocol. Synapse is, I don't know that it's like official, but it's kind of the most popular one as far as I know. So anyway, Synapse is going to be the main Matrix server that is, handling our messages. The Matrix Authentication service is an additional component that runs separately, and it's handling the OAuth 2 stuff. Single sign-on with Google or GitHub or whoever your upstream provider may be. And I really don't like this thing, but it's unfortunately necessary. I am going to avoid talking about the technical details of this. How much of this do I want to get into? Not very much. Point being, I need to deploy this additional Matrix Authentication service beside my Synapse server so that upstream OAuth 2 stuff with Google and GitHub will work for the more modern Matrix client, Element X. Okay, so, this is getting very confusing very quickly, I understand. So Synapse by default does support some OAuth identification login stuff, but it only works with the old Element client. And so in order to have OAuth with the new Element X client, you need to also deploy this Matrix Authentication service, which I believe they are going to be keeping for the long term. If we look in the repo, are we OIDC yet? Confetti, hooray. Anyway, well, we can find a link to this. I'll save a link to this in my Git comment because I like to put my additional stuff on my own servers. This doesn't go on YouTube. You have to go here to get this link. Anyway, so they are using this Matrix Authentication service as a in-between middleman to do logins with OAuth 2 and Synapse. It's a little bit weird and a little bit annoying that it has to be deployed and configured separately. So anyway, I have to deploy it. You don't necessarily have to deploy this depending on your specific use case. It just so happens that for me, I really want both to use the modern client and to be able to sign in with Google. So I have to deploy this. Anyway, the next part is this MatrixRTC backend. I think I mentioned this earlier in the video. I don't recall why, but we're not going to worry about that. The MatrixRTC backend is for handling voice over IP and video calls. So in the old version, the original Element client, it used Turn. The Turn protocol, specifically, I deployed something called CoTurn to my network, and CoTurn is what's handling the voice over IP and video call stuff. And it works. Like I said, it is this, do I still have that up? The small hack repository. If we look at the charts that it includes, we can see that it includes a chart for CoTurn. And I was able to deploy this. I had to do some manual configuration, and I also had to deploy it into a separate namespace. But I was able to deploy it and get it to work. I was able to have voice over IP calls with other people on my Matrix server. But, you know, those manual configurations didn't survive the Docker containers being restarted. And so at this stage, the CoTurn is not working. And it also doesn't work for the Element X modern client, which uses this MatrixRTC backend. So those are a few problems with this small hack chart. It's using the old CoTurn instead of new WebRTC, and it's also set up incorrectly so that you need to deploy each component into its own individual namespace, because they all try to use the same database, and it doesn't really like that. So anyway, long story short, we want WebRTC or MatrixRTC backend instead of CoTurn, and that is included with this chart. The next component is a client, and this was also included with the small hack chart, which does work. It is just Element Web. It's like a website. I can type in element.eom.dev, and we can see my current version of this, assuming that it's actually running. It should be. Yeah, it's running. So anyway, we don't need to log in here or see anything. Element is our client. So again, to back up, Synapse is our server, Element is our client. The Matrix Authentication service sits beside the server and handles logins through OAuth 2, single sign-on with Google stuff. And this MatrixRTC backend also sits beside the Synapse server and handles our voice over IP and video calls. There's some other stuff in the background like Postgres and some Kubernetes stuff like our ingress controller and things like that, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. Okay, so that's our basic stack. Those are the things that we are deploying with this chart here. So let's get into it and start actually deploying it. Again, Matrix tools, I'm not actually sure what that is. So let's skip this section for now and see if that becomes relevant later. Okay. Cert Manager Issuer to configure the vault automatically on all ingresses. I have read through these values, so I have some idea of what I'm showing you here. So this is for creating SSL certificates. Now, if you're creating this or deploying a Matrix server or any website, and you only want to be able to access it, on your local network when you're logged into your Wi-Fi network or, your company network or whatever, you don't need to worry as much about SSL certificates. Or you can use a self-signed one or something like that. If you want your services to be accessible over the internet, which I do, then you need to have your SSL certificates signed by an upstream authority. In my case, I'm using Let's Encrypt, certbot, if you're familiar with that. And I have in my Kubernetes cluster something called a cluster issuer named here. And this is something that is tied to Let's Encrypt upstream. And so it makes it easy when I deploy new services. I can say, hey, use that cluster issuer to get a certificate. And whatever service I'm deploying will automatically get an SSL certificate from Let's Encrypt upstream that has been signed by this trusted third party. And that's necessary because when other people try to access my website over the internet, they're not going to trust a certificate that I've signed myself. That would be kind of silly. Their browser won't load the page unless there is a certificate from a trusted third party, Let's Encrypt being one of them. So using a cluster issuer like this allows me to automatically get all of the SSL certificates I need. So I think I should probably set this to CA issuer, which is the name of my cluster issuer. That's actually not the best way to do that. I should do CA issuer was not a very great name for my cluster issuer when I created it, but I didn't really know what that field was going to be used for when I did. And at this point, changing that name is a pain. It would require a lot to go back and change that name. So unfortunately, I'm going to leave this as is. Also, I am avoiding changing this comment at the moment. Generally speaking, when I'm doing something like this, I want to leave the comments as they are for documentation purposes. If I come back later, I can see, the green line here says that something has changed. I think I should get rid of. Let me do a few undos. I guess I can't. Anyway, I don't want to edit the comment just for the purpose of documentation. So if I decide later that this is not what I want, then I can see what it was supposed to be without having edited the actual documentation. Okay. Now I have done this. I have set this value, and I need to delete this empty dictionary. I've set this value, but I'm not sure that that was a good idea. And the reason I'm not sure is, I guess I just don't trust it. It says it's going to automatically generate the TLS secret name and all that stuff for all ingresses, and I guess I just don't trust it to do it correctly, so I'm tentatively putting that there. Okay. So I think I'm going to start deleting some things here because all of this is unnecessary. Also, what I am defining here in my values section is going to overwrite what exists in the repository as a default. And the repository can be updated, the defaults can be updated, and if I have the defaults specified again here, then those updates will never take effect. So it's better to only specify what I actually want to change in this. So I'm going to actually delete some things. I don't think there's anything in this matrix tag, matrix tools that I need to change. So I've changed that. Now I know I just said I don't want to change the documentation, but I think I will delete the comments anyway. So, it depends what you're doing. Okay, this one, server name. So maybe I want to use a variable here. So we can come over here. This is going to be a bit small if you're looking at it on a phone. But in our defaults and main.yaml defaults, this is all of those default values that I was mentioning from the values.yaml. You can define a bunch of variables in this file, and they will be the default values for things in here. And do I want that to be a variable? I think I do. For me personally, I would just hard code this to be eom.dev, but in order to make this useful for other people, it might be better to not do that. And I probably should change, if I'm going to be thinking about making this useful for other people, I should probably make the default value something like example.com. Okay. That way you and I both have to change this. Okay. Labels to add. I don't think there's anything there. Okay, ingresses. How they should be constructed by default unless otherwise overridden. Now I'm going to take a look at the example here. So I do have some annotations listed in this one. And you see, that's why where I said this cert manager cluster issuer, where it says it's automatically going to apply it to everything, this is where I start to wonder about that, because here I am specifying in an annotation that I want cert manager IO cluster issuer CA issuer, and over here I suppose I don't need that annotation because I've specified it up here. I don't know. I'm not sure. We'll just have to try it and find out. So I will add the Nginx one though. I guess this is a bad idea to copy it manually. So let's do that a little bit more precisely. There we go. And what about the indentation? Okay. Okay, so we're going to keep the Nginx annotation, and we're going to leave off the cert manager and annotation. Not sure if that's going to work. We will see. And there's also, in the back of my mind, going to be some difficulty with deploying this, given that I already have an existing Matrix deployment. So first of all, Let's Encrypt is not going to issue me additional certificates for domains that already have certificates issued. And also, well, I don't know. Let's just leave it there for now. Let's just leave it there. Cool. So I do want TLS. We are going to want certificates. New secret. So that's not relevant. Service type, cluster IP. This is referring to in Kubernetes, you have a variety of ways that you can deploy your services in terms of how they are going to be networked. Cluster IP means they're going to have an IP that is only addressable within the cluster itself. You could also do something called a node port, where the host machine is going to pick a port, usually above 30,000, and assign that to the service, and there's going to be some port forwarding magic to take like port 30,852 and forward that to port 80 on the container that we're going for. That's a node port style. And then there's also load balancer, which is going to assume that you have a load balancer that can assign an IP address. And I do have such a load balancer, but I don't think we need to change this. And since I don't need to change it, I should delete it. And I should also be deleting this TLS enabled, since that is the default value. No pull secrets. Tolerations, don't need to worry about that. There's nothing. Tolerations is for when I have a variety of machines or nodes onto which Kubernetes might deploy a pod or a service. You can add something called a taint to a pod or a node, and that taint will say, hey, this one has, GPUs running in it, and don't run any pods over here unless they are specifically wanting to use a GPU. That would be a taint. And then a tolerance is used to say, this is a service that needs a GPU, so use that node. And I don't have any of those for this particular project, so we're just going to delete that. Topology spread, the same sort of thing. I don't know nothing about node topology spreads. Okay. We are making good progress. We have deleted at least 30 lines. It's like 100th of how far we need to go. So, good stuff. I will probably end up doing this in several segments. And like I said, each segment will be uploaded to this Git issue, which exists somewhere. Here it is. I'll put them in one at a time and embed them into this. And so, there will be a living history along with this. Anyway. Okay. Init secrets. I don't know that there's anything I need to add for that. But I said a moment ago that we would hold off on talking about difficulties in my existing matrix setup. Let's go into one of them now. So matrix is a federated protocol, and what I mean by that is that if you deploy an instance of Matrix or Synapse, and I deploy an instance of Synapse, then people who use my server can talk to people who are using your server. And this is like an email. So a gmail.com email address can send messages to a yahoo.com email address and vice versa. So Matrix works in the same way. In order to achieve this, it needs to use some special encryption techniques because these are all end-to-end encrypted chats. So whether you're having users join rooms on another server or having one-on-one communications with a user in a different server, there is some encryption stuff that needs to happen. I'm not going to go into details. And since I already have an existing Matrix deployment, there is a secret key that is used for encryption over these federated protocols and identifying my server. And I believe I can copy that over to this new instance. Whether or not doing so will prevent issues, I don't know. So what I'm thinking about is, I have this these existing chats, existing rooms, conversations with people that I have met so far. And when I redeploy this Matrix instance, I want to avoid having to reconnect with all those people. So the encryption key probably needs to be copied over, but whether or not that's actually going to preserve these chats, I don't know. Additionally, there is a Postgres database that runs beside Synapse, and that will need to be copied over as well. So we'll see. It might be better and easier to just take this opportunity to start from scratch and reconnect with those people, create new rooms. That might be the easiest option. We will have to see. So these init secrets, I wonder if there is an init secret for that specific thing. You know what I mean? That encryption key. I don't necessarily see one. So actually, let's do this a little different. I'm going to delete the internals. Just because it's a little easier to see what is actually part of, this init secrets. I think I want to delete this whole init secrets, but I don't know what all is a part of it, so I'm just kind of doing it a chunk at a time. Okay, this is where, you recall I was saying that I'm not sure what the pro version is giving over the community version, and where I was saying that, things about scalability and reliability. Here we can see that these components are requesting certain resources. So this one is requesting 50 MB of RAM and 50 I'm not sure, megahertz of CPU clock speeds, whatever. I don't know. And I wonder if the difference between the community edition and the professional edition or the pro edition is simply some of these values. I'm not sure. We can tweak these values ourselves, so that would be great if that was the case. Same thing, yeah, limits. See this limit? That especially, I wonder about that. For now, though, I don't have a ton of users on this Matrix protocol, so I can probably just stick with the requests and limits that are here by default and just let that be until I start reaching the edge of what I can handle, and then I can come in and bump up the ones that need to be bumped and ignore the ones that do not. That's a rather efficient way of doing things. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that. I might want to change that. Okay. So now we're in the MatrixRTC component. I'm going to take a brief break, and I'll be back in 2 to 3 minutes. And we're back. All right, so MatrixRTC. I have not configured this myself in the past, so let's go back over to the actual repo, and let's open up the README that's in the chart. And we can see that down here we have some of the most basic configurations that we would typically need for a deployment. Here's for Synapse. If we go down to MatrixRTC backend, seems like that's not rendering correctly, but minimum set of values to bring MatrixRTC backend would be just this ingress and host name. SFU. I don't know what that is. With LiveKit. Let's Google that. End-to-end stack for WebRTC, SFU. I guess this is for authentication with... Plain WebRTC is a peer-to-peer protocol. When two peers connect with one another, they exchange, ignoring data channels, audio and video media directly. This works well for a set of 2 to 3 peers, but how many people have an... What? This works well for a set of 2 to 3 peers, but how many people have an internet connection which can consistently upload 5 720p video streams simultaneously? That's a weird sentence. Not many. Thus, scaling WebRTC to groups of more than 2 to 3 people requires a client-server model. Popular fable of this model is MCU. Okay. LiveKit is written in Go, leveraging Python. Huh? Okay, well, this might be important. I don't know. For the time being, it doesn't seem like it is. Okay, well, there's some additional information here. Which link did that open? Let's read this. For production deploys, we recommend using a config file. The config file can be passed in via, that's not important. Below is a recommended config file for production deploy. What are they setting? RTC ports, Redis, keys. Maybe this is a difference in the professional version. I wonder if there's a co-turn deployment included in that. I wonder if I can get back to the main chart. Doesn't really say anything. Okay, well, I guess I'm just not going to worry about this live kit stuff right now. I don't know what that is, and it sounds like it's necessary if you have a lot of people using voice calls, which I do not have at the moment. Hopefully in the future I will have that, but at the moment I do not. So I am going to ignore the live kit authentication configuration, and we are just going to delete that section. I believe all we need is we should be able to, whoops, I deleted stuff, that's okay. We should be able to, let me actually undo that. Because it says that the minimum configuration that I need is ingress host. Yeah, see, that's okay, well, yeah, never mind. There. Let's call it MatrixRTC.eom.dev. Or maybe we should just do RTC. It's a little bit more succinct. It's enabled by default, so I don't need to conclude that. And I'm assuming that the TLS stuff, the cluster issuer, all of that should come from that previous thing that I've done, so should be fine. Yeah. We don't really know on this one. This one's we're gonna find out. I'm just going to assume that pretty much everything is going to be default. Nothing here is standing out as I'm looking at it. I would love to see a new section, SFU. Let's get rid of that. And is this part of the... Weird. Okay, do I need to turn this off? So I've taken out that WebRTC, or not that live kit configuration stuff. I don't know. This is experimental. I guess I can just leave this as alone. I'm just gonna leave it alone. A lot of stuff here. And we're just gonna delete it and go with the defaults. I am hoping to see a new section soon. Please. Element web. There we go. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I don't really know what all goes into this MatrixRTC section. From the basic config, it seems like that's sufficient, but I assume that as I begin using this deployment, I will probably find issues and need to add additional values to this configuration, fleshing out a lot of the things I've just deleted. But I can do that as I go, and updating something using the same Helm chart is not as big an ordeal as it is switching from one Helm chart to another. So Helm and Kubernetes are designed to handle situations like this specifically, where later on I find I need different configurations in this specific Helm chart. So I just change it here in this YAML file and then run the same deploy. Ansible is idempotent, so it's going to only change the things that are not as they are defined in this file. So, if I had originally used this deployment and then I decided I wanted to change some things in this config, I could just change it, run the deploy, and it would change, and it would all be fine and happy. But since I'm using one Helm chart over here and another Helm chart over here, I'm going to have to do some manual work to copy over things like existing database tables and values and those encryption keys that I was mentioning earlier. So yeah, that's a thing. Element Web. This is our client. I showed you my current element.eom.dev, and I don't know that there's much that we need to configure for this. We can first, let's look at over here. I have I would like for that to not be highlighted. There we go. I have something for element already. Here we go. And nothing really interesting in this except for the permalink prefix. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that in this configuration, but I don't know what to expect. And also let's check out the minimum config for it. Yeah, just this. And then extra configuration can be provided as a JSON string. Yeah, okay. I think we can pretty much go with just that. Which is to say just that ingress, I think that was. Yeah, just the ingress host. If you're wondering, this is the Kate web or code editor or IDE, KATE, KDE, Kate, and I'm also using Vim key bindings on this, which is just a setting. You can just turn on, it's called Vi mode, and your typical Vim keyboard shortcuts will work, in case you're wondering that. Anyway, so the host for this is going to be element.eom.dev, and we should be able to delete everything else. Okay, HAProxy. Why do I need this? I don't think I need this. I think I should disable that. Let me explain. What is this? Routing to Synapse processes. I don't have that in my current deployment. There is no HAProxy in my current deployment. So I don't know why it's here. I guess it's not an issue. So for the time being, I'm going to leave it. And is there anything about it in this? Not that I'm seeing. Okay, let's add HAProxy. It feels unnecessary to me. I feel like between my ingress controller and that's kind of it. Um, but the ingress controller should be able to handle this on its own. I don't know why HAProxy is necessary, unless does Synapse have in its deployment. Let me scroll down. Let's skip to the end here. In fact, let's just do we have more than one thing? Is there more than one instance of this deployed? I think we want that, so note to self. What is all of this? This has not led where I thought it would lead. So I was wondering if the deployment would have, multiple instances of Synapse, and that HAProxy was going to be, handling some load balancing to that or something. But that's not exactly what I'm seeing here. So I'm going to abandon ship. Yeah, this is the end. So okie dokie, let's get back up to where we were. Well, I assume the defaults can be accepted. I have no reason to change them at this point. Basically, what I'm going to do is just deploy it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't work, then I will allow the specific problems to tell me what to change. Okay, the auth service. Now this is the thing that is handling OAuth 2 open identification with Google or GitHub, upstream, whoever. I don't think I need anything different on this image stuff. Force authentication to happen with legacy authentication. This can be used to deploy Matrix Authentication service and keeping auth on Synapse. Once mass is deployed, you can run the syn to mass tool to migrate the data from Synapse to mass. Should be set back to false and never switched again after the migration to mass has been run. Okay, I guess. Well, on my current server, the users will have been created as Synapse users, not mass users, Matrix Authentication Service users. And so I suppose I would need to run syn to mass in order to migrate that data. So I don't know that it's going to be... Well, it would be possible if I had used a single deployment, but I guess I would need to probably deploy Matrix Auth service to my current Matrix stack, run this syn to mass tool, and then I would have the data in a Matrix Auth service database for those users. Then I could delete that whole deployment and deploy this one and copy that data over again. Boy, that's kind of annoying. That's really annoying. So I might end up having to just, start from scratch with my Matrix deployment, and I don't know what effect that's going to have on people who are currently in existing rooms or have existing chats with me. The chat history will be lost, which I guess I'm kind of okay with. But I am worried about those people trying to reconnect with, my same user at my same domain and finding that some encryption key is saved somewhere, and that could be a spicy problem. We're just going to have to keep rolling with it. It's going to be deploying its own Postgres database. Yeah, here, this encryption secret, this is not the right place for it because this is the Matrix Authentication service, and I do not have that currently deployed in my current Matrix stack. But if I had, this is what I was talking about. And something similar to this exists in the Synapse server for federation. But there's some encryption secret that it uses in order to, identify itself with other people. And this is why I think there might be a problem when I redeploy Matrix and try to reconnect with the same users. And yeah, but I'm not sure there's any way to fix that. So we're just going to delete it. Let all that auto-generate. Let that auto-generate. We do need to provide some additional configuration here somewhere. Whether or not this is the correct place, I don't know. A lot of these will be generated. And actually, let's check on our minimum requirements here. Just our ingress host name. Oh, this is useful. Okay, well, let's start with that host. I think the rest of this can be deleted. Just kind of skimming it as I go, see if there's anything that stands out. And I'm looking for the next section. Aha, Postgres. So I think there's more that needs to be added here. Specifically, well, I know there's more that needs to be added here because if we look over on the right, we can see that our Matrix Authentication service here has some additional fields filled out. So stuff for email, stuff for specifically which OpenID client we're going to use or upstream provider we're going to authenticate with. And so there is definitely more configuration that needs to be added over here, but I don't see exactly where to put that just yet or how to copy this over. Maybe it's just copy and pasting into this additional config section. But let's just move on for right now. This Postgres, probably what I want to change here is the amount of storage space it has, if possible. Persistence is probably the word I'm looking for. Do I want to set a password? Yeah, it'll be generated. I don't need a password. So this is a bit deceptive. Oh no, it's not. I'm just seeing my indentations a bit oddly. Okay, so here I get to set how much memory I want to give to this, and if we look over here, I originally gave 256 gigabytes to Postgres, and that does seem about right. I could always increase it to 512 or a terabyte. No, 256. Let's do 512. So I don't really have the ability to increase this later, just because of the way these persistent volume claims work. But I do have the ability to what? Yeah, well, it's not so much that I have the ability so much as when I actually look, it's hard to explain. So like, when I look at the persistent volume claim and say, how much memory do you have? It says that it has the full disk space, so like 32 terabytes available, even if I say only allocate 512 gigabytes. So I'm not sure what's going on there in Kubernetes. Once we reach 512, is Kubernetes going to say, stop there, stop writing to this volume claim? Or is it going to say, no, we have 32 terabytes total and we can keep going? I don't know. And so I generally try to give it more than it could possibly need. And I haven't seen it yet say, hey, you've allocated more than 32 terabytes. So I guess 512 is 256 seems reasonable. It's just a database for, there's a lot of things. Let's just, do I want to give it 2 terabytes? I think I want to give it 2 terabytes. Overkill. I like overkilling it. Plus, I've kind of reduced the number of services that I'm hosting total. I've kind of narrowed my focus down to Git for code and automation, Discourse for slow lane communication, works like an email server in a sense, whatever. And then this is the fast lane. Matrix is the fast lane. So I think it makes sense to give it a good amount of storage, but. Anyway, storage class. It should just be the default. Yeah, we'll use the cluster default if not provided. That's what I want. Don't need to change anything about this. You can see here on the right that I had to write some stuff to create the database tables that I wanted for this deployment. And that's one of the examples of why this deployment on the right here isn't quite as good. And hack is not a terrible name for this on the right, but it served me well. And actually, they've taken a few of my pull requests, which I appreciate. So I've actually contributed to the one on the right here. So we can blame me for it. Anyway, let's continue. This stuff is not necessary. Synapse. Okay. So we've reduced this file quite a lot. Let's check out the minimum config. Yeah, just the ingress. I might have needed to set this ingress stuff at the top as like a default for everything, and I think I just deleted that section, so we might need to go back and add that, but we'll get there. For now, let's focus on the ingress for Synapse. Okay. Something about a persistent volume claim, that's going to be, I'm going to give that, I'm going to come back to that. Signing key. I think this is what I was, yeah, here we go. Key used to sign events and federation requests. So I have an existing key for my existing deployment, and I could print it out and use it. I don't know that that's actually going to save me any of the trouble that I'm worried about. I'm going to actually leave this section here for a second. This doesn't seem... Macaroon. What's a macaroon? Whatever. Additional configuration might be important. We can look over here. That could potentially be important. Doesn't look like I have any additional configuration for Synapse, so I guess we'll delete this for now. What's this, workers? I don't think I need to worry about this too much. Though I do want Prometheus metrics, which I know is a part of this somewhere. What's this? I guess it's... So encryption should be available on default Synapse. I don't think I need to deploy this additional worker. Maybe I do in order to have encryption. I'll have to find out. I think I'm just going to delete this section. A lot of this stuff I'm just going to delete until I know I need it. It was a long section. Yeah, see these workers. I don't know what these are. I'm tempted to just delete them and then go look, and or let's at least highlight. Let's finish highlighting them all, and then this seems like a different section. Okay. And here we go. Ingress. There's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't really read too carefully. Again, I don't think a lot of this is necessary. These requests and limits for resources are going to be important as I'm gaining more users and as I'm running into issues with that. But for the moment, I think we can just stick with the defaults. And Redis, is this a different... Nope, this is within... Interesting. I don't think I need to set anything in this section for Redis. I don't think I need to set this. Okay. Hold on. A couple things here at the bottom. It's well-known delegation. That seems important. Let me go back over to this. server name. This seems fine, and it seems like, you know, the things I was worried about over here with yeah, this additional stuff, I don't know, maybe that's handled here. This isn't the well-known section, but yeah, we see like well-known is up here. I guess this thing is handling that, and I don't think I need this, because if we look at the minimum configuration, it just needs the server name, which I already have at the top. So I guess I don't need to do anything for this, and we can just delete the whole thing. Okay. For media, let's increase that. 256 GI. I might want more than that still. Maybe 2 terabytes again. I don't know. Some of these things I'm not sure about. I think that's our basic configuration though. Let's start at the top, and yeah, you can see that once we've deleted all those comments and all those fields that we're not setting, the file is only actually 100 lines long from the original 3000. So, you know, this isn't actually as bad as it seems. Okay, what was I thinking about this original ingress thing? Ingress configuration. Ingress of the individual components in the chart can share the same configuration using the ingress base section. Configure any annotations, class name, TLS secret here to set them globally, which will then apply them to each component ingresses. You can override them on a per component basis. You can unset a common ingress annotation on a per component basis by setting it to null. Okay. So let's see. I think I'm going to add a few things here. Pulling from the left, specifically here, I'm going to add and these other things like intercept errors off. These additional hosts. I don't really know. Both of them are saying to turn that off. Element does not. I might go ahead and add that. Oh, I already have it. Okay. What did I do? I like that one better. Okay, let's continue along here. Okay. set the ingress for MatrixRTC. We've set the ingress for Element Web. We've set the ingress for the authentication service. I need additional configuration for that. Postgres is fine. We just use the storage. Synapse. I need to think about this. I'll check back with the original config too. And I need to think about how to handle this signing key if I want to bother. So the next steps for me here are going to be trying to deploy this, and I need to decide whether or not I'm going to try to keep my original Matrix deployment, and that is going to have a significant impact on how I move forward with this. So I think I'm going to leave this here for now. If I just save this, then I can so do I want to close this issue? No, I don't. So I'm just going to add a message that says initial pass through the values, and let's get push. And we go back to our repo. We should be able to see. That looks right. Okay. So we've made a pretty good start here. We've started going through the values for this deployment. We have a few questions as to what needs to be done further and how I am going to proceed given my existing deployment. So I need to take some time to think about that. I'm going to pause this stream for the time being, and maybe it'll be later today or maybe tomorrow I'll come back and continue along with this project. So thank you very much for joining me. Once again, this video is going to be posted as a comment in this issue on Git. It will also be uploaded to YouTube, where you may like and subscribe, and also find a link to this issue in the video description. And that will do it for me right here, right now. Thank you again for joining, and I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.